Today I am joined by Hollie Arnett. Hollie is a brand strategist and coach for creatives and the founder of Maker and Moxie. With a background in graphic design and experience in her own art practice, Hollie is somebody who knows the power of creativity and how building a brand can enable your creative business to thrive. And that's why she's on a mission to help creators to build their brand, grow their audience, and share their work with the world so that together we can make the world a more creative place, one brand at a time. If you're at the beginning of your creative entrepreneurship journey and you're thinking about things like, what should my logo look like? What color should I choose for my brand? How do I go about choosing a brand name? I want you to dive into this episode with me here today because we are talking all things branding and brand strategy. If you are already an existing creative entrepreneur, you already run your own business, we also cover a few tips and tricks about how to go about a rebrand. Do you need to start from scratch? Do you need to chuck everything out and start all over again? Or is there a different approach to take when it comes to rebranding your brand as well? I'm excited to share this episode with you, so let's jump into it. I'm Ryde. I'm a designer, an entrepreneur, and online educator obsessed with all things design, quilting, and creative business. It's time to embark on a creative odyssey. All right. Well, I'm thrilled to be here with Hollie Arnett, CEO and founder of Maker and Moxie. Welcome, Hollie.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So great to have you here. It's so great to reach out to different Antipodeans all around the world, I guess, and meet up online. It's fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about you, who you are, where you are, and what it is that you do?
Yeah, of course. So as you said, I am the founder of Maker and Moxie, but my business started out actually as a hand lettering studio. I'm sure we will talk a little bit about the name, but it started out called Black and White Studios. I started out doing hand lettering and typography, which then developed into doing like hand lettered logos. People were like, yeah, can you hand letter my this special logo for my business? Which then that developed into realizing that a brand is so much more than just a logo. So I was like, I need to, and I want to develop like full brands. And then I realized, okay, well, in order to do that, I need to do some element of brand strategy in order to do that, which I realized I was actually already doing, but I wanted to formalize that. And also I realized that was actually what I loved and what I was really good at and what my sort of zone of genius was. So then that transformed into that. And then I realized that my favorite people were artists and makers. And so I then kind of pivoted and niched down into doing brand strategy and coaching for makers and artists. And so that's where Maker and Moxie kind of like finalized and flourished and became what it is today. So that's what I'm focusing on now. And then I've also just kind of in the last year relaunched another illustration business so that I can sort of come full circle back around to also getting back into like being an artist myself as well. And I'm also a sewist. I've also just in the last year or so learnt to sew, so I'm very much getting into your world as well, and just started dipping my toes into learning to, I haven't started to quilt yet, but I've started following lots of quilting people, so I'm starting to get into your world, but I'm a little bit nervous. But that's a bit about me.
Don't
anyway.
be nervous, don't be nervous. I'm going to warn you though, once you get into quilting, it's really addictive, okay? So once you make one quilt, you'll make like 10 quilts straight away. Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
That's awesome.
I can tell.
What a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. And you talked about, you kind of come full circle around back again to, we might talk about this a little bit later in the interview as well, but coming back around again, you kind of gone through the whole brand strategy, business growth, all that kind of stuff. And then coming back around to refocusing on your creativity as an artist as well. And I think that's something that when you start to grow a business, you get really into the business side of things, and then you kind of lose touch sometimes with your artistic side and the creative side and the reasons why you started this business in the first place. So it's really great to hear that you're managing to incorporate all of your creativity in your business as well. That's really cool. So your creative journey sounds really amazing. Yeah, like hand lettering to being maker and then to kind of this online business world, which is sort of where a lot of us are as well, starting out making quilts and designing quilts, and then, you know, stepping into this world of creative entrepreneurship, which I think is really exciting. How did you go about developing your own brand in the beginning? You know, you were kind of in this space and working in that area because you're already creating logos and things like that. But how did you kind of take that next step into developing your own brand?
Yeah, I think my first thought, well, I actually trained, like, my degree is in visual communication, and so I have that's what I think about a lot anyway. And so like, obviously the visuals was a big part of it, but for me, everything I have thought about the whole time throughout my journey is about, like, how can I make sure people know that this is what I do and this is what I want more work doing. And so for me, when I wanted to start building my brand as a hand lettering artist and a typographer, my strategy or my approach, I suppose, was like, I just want to be known as that. So I was like, what are all the things that I can do to get known as that? So I was like, making obviously content, like, on social media. I was writing blog posts about being a hand lettering artist. I was vlogging, if people still do that. I was like, vlogging what it's like to be a hand lettering artist, like my day as a hand lettering artist. I was interviewing other hand lettering artists, like women who were in typography. I was doing everything I could to make sure that people knew, like, if you think Hollie, you think hand lettering. And so that was my approach to building my brand, was like, yes, the visuals, but more importantly, how can I associate, like, Hollie with hand lettering? That is my number one approach. And same now, it's like the same strategy now, is how can I make sure that when people think brand strategy for artists, that Hollie is the first person that comes to mind, because I'm always repeating that same topic. I'm always, like, making content about that. I'm always on podcasts about talking about that. I'm always doing stuff that makes sure that I am repeating that thing over and over and over again.
And hey, it works, because when I was talking to my mentorship about brand strategy, the first person that I thought of was Hollie, because of her amazing branding and brand strategy. So there you go. It totally works.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that you talk about all of that kind of extra stuff that I think sometimes goes a little bit overlooked. It's so exciting, especially as creatives and as visual people. The first thing we think about is, oh my gosh, I need to grow a business, so I need to make my logo, and I need to, you know, choose my colors, and I need to get my fonts organized and all those kinds of things, which is stuff that we really are attracted to because we are artists, we are creative, and we are visual. But really behind all of that, there's a lot to it as well. So you talked a little bit about that there. What are the kinds of things that people should start out with? Is it the logo and the name and the fonts and the colors, or should people be starting thinking more about who their ideal client is, what do they want to be known for, what their mission are, what their values are, all those kinds of things?
Yeah, definitely the second part of things. In an ideal world, I know that I'm not going to win over everybody with with that, because it is so tempting, and so much so, especially for creatives, that it is the more exciting side of things to jump into, like picking colors and designing logos and, like, designing your website and all that stuff. But the thing that for me is the real kicker is that you are going to end up redoing all of that stuff if you don't put in the work to figure out, like, why you're making those decisions. Because you know, if you choose colors and you design a website and you write copy and you do all of that stuff, but it's attracting the wrong people, or it doesn't stand out, or it doesn't represent you in the right way, or, you know, it's doing all of the wrong things, or you've chosen it because you like it, or it's cool, or it's trendy, or whatever, which are, you know, valid reasons that people do those things. It might last you 6 months or a year or something, and then you'll realize that, oh, it hasn't actually gotten me any clients, or I didn't get any opportunities out of that, or it was fun to do, but it hasn't actually resulted in what I wanted it to result in. So the reason that brand strategy is so important, and why, people like you and I are so, insistent on doing this work that we've just mentioned, on like figuring out who your ideal client is, and why you're doing this, and what your vision is, and what you want to communicate, and like what you do want to be known for, is so that then when you know all of that, then you can go back to all the fun stuff and you can go, okay, I'm going to choose colors that I know represent me really well, are going to stand out in the market, and are going to attract the perfect people that like love those colors and are going to see that and go, wow, I want that. And so it's choosing colors and imagery and, making all of those brand decisions intentionally that are going to actually work towards achieving your goals. So that's why all of that stuff is so important to do first. So, yes, ideally you would start with all of the brand strategy things. So yeah, I would recommend especially starting with your, like, why am I doing this? My whole business, my passion, and what do I want to be known for? So like I said, even just that basic thing, like brand strategy for creatives. I don't know. Yeah, quilting, obviously, but get more specific than that. Like, what is it within quilting? Who are you quilting for? What type of quilting? What style of quilting? I don't know, specifics. And then, yeah, who for, what style? Like, get into those specifics, and then you can start making design decisions and then marketing decisions from that are going to actually achieve your goals from there.
Yeah, and I just want to tie that a little bit back to what you said before as well, about how you went into your content creation as well, knowing, okay, I want to be known for this one specific thing. And what that does, it's almost like deciding on a color palette when you're designing something. You give yourself these parameters, and they're actually freeing as opposed to restrictive, because you have a direction to go in, and you don't have to think, I have a million choices to make here, and every day I have to confront these million choices that I need to make about what should I be posting on my social media today. Today, I know that I'm going to be posting about modern quilting because that's my thing, or I'm going to be posting about brand strategy because that's what I need to be known for. So coming up with that kind of strategy overall at the beginning, which is also going to help inform your decisions that you make about your brand identity assets, like your logo and your name and your colors and all those kinds of things. They are those sort of set parameters beforehand that really allow you to be freer from all of those multiple decisions you need to make all of the time, and have a real clear direction on what it is that you need to create, what it is you need to get out there, and really start getting a little bit of traction on that, because it's so easy to have, this overwhelming feeling of there are 365 days in the year. Oh my gosh, I have to invent something new for 365 days to post on Instagram, when really you just need to be repeating the same thing over and over again in new ways to new people, right? That's kind of, I guess, the secret behind content creation in a way.
Exactly. Exactly. The secret when you talk to any like social media manager or content creator or anything is like, you have a core topic so say, for example, for me, it's like branding for creatives, right? Within that, you have content pillars, which you might have 5. Let's say, like for me, I have 4. So I have brand strategy, brand design, brand marketing, like brand growth, and then brand systems. So that's 4 things. And then you might have, within that, you have like different, say you have like 5 subtopics within that. That's 20. So now we're at like 20 subtopics, right? Then say you have like different ways of creating content. You'll see like different types of content on the internet, right? Memes, like challenging a limiting belief, showing work in progress, showing like finished work. What, like, say we have 5 of those. So let's times those 20 subtopics times 5. That's 100 pieces of content from your like one main topic. So that's just
exactly
like a really simple system that can help you make 100 pieces of content. It's actually like quite simple if you just break it down that way, but it can become really overwhelming. But if you just try and think like, okay, what's my main topic? What am I, if I break down my like 4 pillars and then think about like, okay, what are 5 topics I can talk about under modern quilting, or 5 topics I can talk about under like whatever your subtopics are, and then what are 4 different ways that I can talk, 4 different types of content that I can create about that topic, then you've got 100 pieces of content. Boom. Or ideas for it, at least.
Yeah, exactly. And it really does simplify things. And so getting really clear on what those core values are, your big why, all of those underlying elements to your business actually do help you not only in like all of that content decision, not only in your kind of like business decisions, if you like, but also in all of these branding decisions as well. And I think that's something that people kind of, because we get excited about the colors and the logo and things like that, it's easy to jump there. And then you kind of come to this point and you're like, okay, well, what's my logo supposed to look like? And you have all of these questions about it because you need to kind of start at that beginning and get that underlying foundation happening before you can make those decisions. I'd love to ask you, how did you choose your business name? How did you choose Maker of Moxie?
Yeah, great question. So as I said, my original name was Black and White Studios, which was actually a terrible name. I don't recommend it. I chose that name very quickly because I was just in a terrible situation, and I actually launched my business very quickly when I needed to choose something. And at the time I was making almost all of my lettering work was black and white. So I was like, okay, Black and White Studios. But the problem was I kept getting like tagged in things about black and white photography. People on LinkedIn kept saying they worked at my company because they did black and white photography. It was very bad for SEO. Just I had a lot of practical problems. And then, obviously, as I told you in my journey, my business moved away from hand lettering and typography and into all of this coaching and strategy stuff for creatives that wasn't really about that anymore. And so I had this realization of these 2 things. Practically, it doesn't work, and spiritually, I don't feel like it aligns with where I'm at or where I'm going. So it needs to change. But before that, I had rebranded visually, and I wanted to keep my icon, which was the ampersand in the middle. So I had this restraint that I wanted to ideally keep an and in the middle, but I set some other parameters as well. I wanted it to feel like aligned with the rest of my brand, so feel very like upbeat and kind of like bubbly like I am and like the rest of my brand is. I wanted it to identify the people that I work with ideally, and yeah, those were kind of the main things. So ideally I wanted it to like, feel like that, identify the people, and hopefully keep the ampersand in the middle. So then I just went about like brainstorming, thinking about lots of words that would work, lots of combinations, looking at like the rest of my brand strategy, looking at lots of thesaurus exploration, and narrowed it down to a few options. I shared it with some people that I trusted and got their feedback. And then I did lots of checks to make sure that it was available. There were a couple of others that I liked that were not available as well. But thankfully, this was the one I loved the most, and it was available. And so, yeah, that was the one that I went with. And I have had nothing but good feedback since I launched it. And I am very happy with it. I think it's much better than Black and White Studios. But that's the main process was like kind of set some parameters based on like your goals and what you want for it. Do some research based on like your brand and your personality. So like words that fit your personality, words that fit your brand. Do the checks to make sure it's available, get some feedback, and then, narrow down and go from there.
Awesome. So when you say checks, you mean things like checking if the social media handle is available, so the @ whatever on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, that's got to be available. I'm assuming also like the domain name needs to be available, those kinds of things that you're checking, as well as, I guess, if anyone's trademarked the name or copyrighted the name or all those kinds of things as well. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
all three of
Awesome.
those things. Yeah. Social media, websites, and trademarks are the things that I checked. Yeah. And then I also trademarked it. So as soon as I saw all those things were available, I started the trademark process because it takes a while. So if you are going to trademark something, like start it as soon as you can because, well, at least in New Zealand, it takes like 6 months plus. So you want to start it as soon as you can if you're going to do it.
Yeah, awesome. Do you think you've changed names. Do you think that was a kind of a setback to you? Do you think you should have spent more time? You mentioned that you should have spent more time up front thinking about the name, but you were kind of in a position where you needed to just choose a name and get started. Without putting too many barriers for people to choose the name, it is something that you can revisit once you kind of become more certain of the direction of your business. That's right, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I don't think it will. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't think it's something that will stop you. I think like I wouldn't rush it, but I also wouldn't stop it if you can't think of something. Don't let it stop you from starting. But it's something that will propel you forward if you change it in the future. Like what happened to me was I chose something, it didn't hold me back, but when I decided to change it and I found something that really did align with my goals going forward, it did propel me forward. So I think the lesson to learn there is that don't be afraid, and it's how I feel with everything in branding, is that you can't be afraid to make decisions or to change things. Like everything in your brand can and should evolve because you as a person evolve, and so don't feel locked into anything in your brand because it will changing things, although not all the time. Like I don't recommend changing things every week or every month or anything, but changing things, if they're well thought out and for a good reason, are only going to propel you forward into the future and into the goals that you set for yourself. So if you're going to, pivot or change your name or anything like that, or rebrand, it's okay. It's only going to be for the better. So if, don't be afraid to make a decision now. Don't be afraid to change something. It's only going to be for the better. That's, I think, it's always going to be my lesson with branding, is that don't feel locked into any decision that you make now, and don't feel like any decision you've made in the past is something you can't change either. It's always something that can evolve and grow as you grow as a person. Yeah,
100%. I think that's really important, especially for people who are just starting out and they have this, it feels like such a big decision, what's my logo going to be? What's my business name going to be? And often, I want to ask your opinion on this, because the advice that I normally give is, if you're really stuck for a name for your business, is just to choose your name or a version of your name and just go with that for now. That's what I did, and I've still got that as my brand name. I feel like that's okay for now. Maybe at some future time I might rebrand as well, but I was trying to move forward in my business when I was starting, and I didn't want that giant pit of what should I choose as my name to be something that held me up. So that's what I went with. Is choosing something like your name or a version of your name, or even using your signature as a logo, is that something that you would advise people to do, or is that something that we should steer away from?
Yeah, no, that's definitely something I recommend. It's the same with logos. Like, that's what I always recommend, is if you logos get people stuck all the time, and people spend far too long doing it. I'm like, I would rather you pick a very nice clear font and just type out your name or your brand name and use that, so that you can move on and start working on how are you going to sell what you're making and how are you going to communicate what you do, then spend weeks or months trying to finesse the perfect logo. Worry about that later when you've figured all the rest of it out, or you've got some money to pay someone else to do it, So yes, absolutely. I am 100% on the train, and some branding experts are probably going to hate me for saying that, but I'm definitely, I just think, as creative business owners, you need to pay the bills, you need to sell your work, we need to start doing the thing. And if you are going to, if it's getting you stuck, if it's making you frustrated, if it's stopping you from doing other things in your business, then absolutely use your name, type it out in a nice clear font, and let's move on. I think absolutely.
I can feel here, Hollie, that you're on the same legibility train as me. Advice I always give is choose some fonts, choose some nice fonts by all means, but make sure that people can understand them. Legibility over all else. Yes. I know that a lot of crafty people love a script font. And as do I in the right context. However, a lot of script fonts are not the easiest to read. So that's why I'm always a clear font, please. Exactly. I wanted to ask you just one more kind of, technical question around this while we're on brand names and logos and things like that. You've got the word maker in your brand name, so this is probably going to tip me off as to what your answer to this question might be. But, for us who are more in the quilting world, things like that, is it advisable to include something like quilt or quilting in our brand name if that's something that is, if that's our main and only focus? And what's the case? I'll just tag this on the end here as well. What's the case when you might be kind of more multi-passionate and you might be a surface designer and a quilt designer? So you're creating fabric designs as well as quilt designs. There's always that kind of fine line between, yes, we want to have a clear niche and indicate to our audience who we're trying to appeal to, who we're speaking to. So by calling out things like the quilter or quilts, we're making a clear signal to that. But then there's also the other flip side to that, which is, am I niching myself down too small? What happens when XYZ, I want to start creating fabrics and therefore garments versus quilts, So what's your opinion about the kind of directness of including a name like that in your brand name? Maker is quite a wide catch-all kind of a name, but quilt or quilting that's a bit of a narrower niche. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that I think for me, maker it's very broad, and it still allows me to basically do whatever I want under Maker or Moxie. I could start selling my own work under there. I could do whatever I want under Maker or Moxie, and it would still make sense, basically. But I don't think you need to have quilt in your name. I think especially now, with the way that search works, with if you think about
how people are searching now. So if you think about TikTok search, how people search on Instagram, it actually doesn't... It's not based on your actual business name. So, people are searching based on the algorithm. It just is surfaced based on the content of your posts, or based on like what's in your bio or in like the tagline of your Instagram name. Same with like on Google. It doesn't have to be in your actual business name. It can be in the metadata of the rest of your website. So I don't think you need to have quilt in your name to still signify to everybody that you do quilting. There are so many other ways that you can show to the world that you do quilting than having it in your name. And I think especially if it's, becoming a part of what we've just talked about, that it's tripping you up in terms of naming, that, it's not a necessary thing. And I think, just think about it practically and all of those things that, it's just not how people are searching now or finding things now. Even at a, face-to-face market, or in person at, anywhere, they're going to see what you have on offer. They're going to see all the quilts hung up, and see your name. So you really don't need to have quilt written there for people to know that. So I would say my verdict is no.
Great answer. I think sometimes as well, if you are open to expanding your business beyond quilting at some stage, maybe you go into teaching people how to sew, and it's garment sewing versus quilting.
Yeah.
You don't want to keep your options. While you want to have a clear idea of who it is you're speaking to, like you want to have a specific audience in mind and you're thinking about the niche that you're in, you also want to give yourself a few options, I think, for the future as well, and just kind of allow yourself that little breathing room to be, okay, well, I can move beyond this. Having said all of that, going back to Hollie's advice earlier in the interview as well, was you can always change your brand name when and if you need to. And I think that segues nicely into something that I wanted to ask you about, as creatives, as makers, as artists. I think one of the big questions we often have is, what's my design style? What's my design voice? And this is often a question that is evolving. The answer is evolving. We don't necessarily just have one design style, one design voice. It's almost like a snapshot of where we are now. How closely tied is your brand identity to your design identity, and how do you see those two things changing and evolving as you grow your business?
I think for artists, it is very, very tied together. I think from what I've seen and experienced from like the creatives that I talk to on my podcast and who I work with, it almost feels like they go through sort of evolutions or these sort of like phases of creativity where there's, I guess like a phase of creativity where we're in like this area of expression, and then we sort of like learn and grow and develop, and then the sort of like new phase like emerges. And then every couple of years it's like there's a cycle that happens, and so I think that the two are definitely intrinsically linked. And because for artists and creatives, we are the person behind the brand. We are the person showing up. We are the person on, Instagram stories, on the Instagram reels, on the TikToks, like talking and sharing our work and speaking and all of that stuff. Like, it is us. It's our soul. It's our creativity. It's us breathing ourselves and our like creativity and our life into everything we put out there. That it has to be connected, and so that's why I feel like as work develops and as these kind of evolutions happen, that the brand evolves as well. And that's what I was saying earlier, that's normal and that's okay, and that's why I'm a big encourager of that happening. I don't want people to feel like that, as artists, we have to listen to the same advice as like Apple or Google or, big corporate people have these massive brand guidelines that have stayed the same for decades, that have never changed or that have hardly ever changed and are not allowed to change. Like they are set in stone or they like have a change every 10 years and it's a huge deal and the news gets involved and like people have massive opinions. But that's not the same for artists. It's not the same. But I feel like sometimes we think it is, and it's like, oh my God, I can never change. I'm not allowed. Like branding has to stay the same. I have to be consistent. And I think consistency, especially because it's a word that's so conflated with branding, like consistency is important, but consistency also evolves. Like consistency can happen on an evolving
timeline spectrum.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, on an evolving timeline. Like you can be consistent but still evolve. So I think as artists you owe it to yourself to let your brand evolve so that you can feel aligned with what you're putting out there and that you can feel proud of what you're sharing and you can feel confident that how you're showing up online and what is out there on your website and your social media and your packaging and like all of that stuff feels good and feels like, this is a representation of me and I feel like I love that and I want to share it with the world and I want to send people to my website and I feel like it looks like what I'm loving right now and it like represents the work I'm putting out there right now and I freaking love it, like that's what I want people to feel like. And so I think as artists you owe it to yourself to let yourself evolve your brand as your work evolves. That's my little
love that
rant.
And absolutely comes back to something you mentioned before as well when you were talking about changing from black and white studios to Maker and Moxie. And I don't know what your old branding used to look like, but I'm just imagining black and white studios and then kind of like Dorothy goes from black and white to Technicolor and you've got your amazing orange and hot pink logo and things. And you talked about how it really felt like part of your soul was in that. It was really lighting you up because black and white studios wasn't really doing it for you. And I feel like that's really what you were just talking about there with, as creatives, as artists, as designers, we want our work to be reflected in our business as well. And so thank you for that permission to not be a corporate square and have to have our corporate square guidelines that can never ever change because we are all evolving. And like you mentioned perfectly well as well, we are behind the business. Like my business is literally my name. It's me. It's not necessarily all of me, but it's a huge part of me. Like what I put out into the world, you can't fake it. You know what I mean? Like it's too much effort to have a fake persona and do that and then be this other real person in some other real life. I mean, it's impossible. So as artists, when you're showing your work, you really are. You're all there. You're showing it. Your brand reflects that. All of the things that you share about are there for other people to see as well. And yes, it's a vulnerable place to be in sometimes, but it's also a really highly fulfilling. I'm sure you'll agree with me that the more you share about your work, the more people respond to it and the more emails you get from people saying, wow, I really love that, or that really reminded me of this thing in my life, and you people start to really make those connections with you. So I think the more that you can express all of that through your own brand as well, the more, like we mentioned at the very beginning of this interview, the more you're able to start attracting those types of people that you'd really like to work with as well. And I think that's fundamentally, that's what we're all in this for, right? Is to work with some amazing people and to make all of those connections. So it was great to hear that. For people who do already have, I know some people in my audience have already got established businesses, people who've already got that existing brand identity and they're looking for some kind of tools to maybe review or update. How do you know, I mean, we kind of talked about it just now, you kind of know when it's time to update or change your brand or your brand identity because you start feeling a little bit embarrassed sending people to your website. It's like, oh no, go to my Instagram because that's more me right now. It's more up to date. My website's kind of, that was not so 1990s or whatever, right?
Yeah.
How do you kind of go about doing that? What do you start with? How do you review your existing brand? Do you just kind of scrap it all and start all over again? Or do you try and have some kind of continuity or consistency of your brand? Like you said, you took your ampersand and you brought that through into your next iteration of branding. How do you navigate that whole change process, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I would do a little bit of an audit. I would take a look at sort of the key brand elements. So, well, first I would start off with just like, how do you feel about your brand overall? So ask yourself some questions about your brand in general, and also how do other people feel about your brand? So, ask yourself, like when you look at your brand, when you're sending people to your website, when you're getting inquiries, like all of that stuff, how do you feel? What do you wish was changed? What do you like? Kind of just get a gauge for how you feel and where you're at. I would get some feedback from some other people. So either or both people who are customers, so people who have bought from you, people who know about your brand but haven't bought from you, and then people who are complete strangers is also a good check-in. So just get some sense checks from other people too, to make sure that it's not just a one-sided thing from you, because we are often too close to things and a little bit biased one way or the other. Either we hate it too much or we love it too much. So it's good to just check in and be like, hey, what do you think of where things are at? Like when you look at my website, when you look at Instagram, what do you think? Because it's actually really helpful. Like once I asked some people, like, what do you know about what I do? And some people were like, oh, I'd never know you had that service. And I was like, oh, that is so helpful for me to know. So just really good to check in with other people. So that would be step number one. Just ask some questions to yourself and other people. Step number two is I would do a bit of an audit of the brand elements. So look at things like the logo, colors, fonts, patterns, imagery, all of those things. And just, you can do like, is it like red, orange, or green? Is it really bad? Is it okay, or is it good? And just check in on all of those things, and then do the same for all of your brand assets. So that's things like your website, your Instagram, your packaging, your email newsletter, your documents, like all of the things that your brand is applied to. And then you can kind of make a bit of a plan from there. And when you've done that check-in, you'll be able to go, okay, was like most of it green, and was the feedback like, we actually really like it, and do I kind of like most of it, but some of it just kind of needs a tweak? Then maybe you can keep most of it, but you just need to like refresh some of it and bring some things to be more consistent and, bring things into alignment a little bit more. But if you got a lot of like red things and some oranges, and the feedback was like, it's a little messy and, not very clear, and, just got some bad feedback, and you were like, I hate it, then maybe you can be like, okay, we need a full reset here. I think I need to start from scratch. Maybe I need some help. That's when you can look to, do a full rebrand from there. So that's what I would do. A bit of an audit of everything, and then you have a logical thing to look at and make a decision from there of how to go about it.
I love that. I'm an engineer from a former life, and I love a good system and a strategy to approach something, as opposed to just, today I really hate everything about my brand, chuck everything out, and then tomorrow come back to it and be like, oh, I just spent 48 hours trying to decide on stuff that actually I probably didn't really need to redo at all. Have that system in place. Absolutely. Yeah. Check in with people, ask people, what is it that you think I do? And if you're getting the feedback of the right sorts of things, then I think that's a great indication that you are on the right path, and that, there might just be some tweaks to make, as opposed to just chucking everything out with the bathwater, which is tempting sometimes, but probably not the best use of your time.
Maybe you just needed a cup of tea and some cake, and you would have felt better, and then,
Exactly. I'd love to hear from you, Hollie. Are there any other tips or things that you'd like to share about branding, brand identity, or, and creative business, or even in quilting specifically? Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Oh, good question.
Well, what's your biggest piece of advice for anybody who's setting up their brand for the first time, or starting to really look seriously into a rebrand even?
Yeah, okay, good question. I think my biggest piece of advice is to just take it one step at a time. I think that when people think about branding, they think I have to do a full rebrand, and I have to do it all at once, and also that then I do it once and I leave it alone for 3 years until I do it again. And that's kind of the cycle of branding. But I think how I approach branding and what my kind of philosophy is that you should, and this is kind of might throw some people off, but you should sort of always be doing branding. It's a kind of cyclical process where you sort of work on your brand strategy, and you do that stuff that we talked about in the beginning, where you figure out okay, what do I want to be doing, and what's the message that I want to send, and who do I want to send it to, and how do I want it to come across, and what's my personality going to be, and all of that stuff. And then you figure out how you're going to present that and show up visually and wow people online so that you stand out and you capture their attention. And then you figure out how am I going to communicate that and market that and grow that. And then you kind of set up some systems so that you can scale that and make sure that it's all going to keep working and you can grow all of that. And then you keep doing that. So you come back and you go, okay, am I still carrying, am I still aligned with my vision? Am I still working and making content for those people that I wanted to reach? Is it working? Am I still aligned with my values? Am I outworking those values? Is my visuals working? And checking in on those, do I need to update my website a little bit to be a bit better? Could I update my packaging and add this? Could I do this? How could I make my marketing better, and check in on that to make sure that it's working? And could I add this system to make it work even better and more smoothly and make my customer experience even better? And you keep doing it, and it's this systematized process where you check in on your brand for me I recommend every 3 months, so that it's little and often, rather than every 3 years you get to a point where you're oh my god, my brand's not working and now I have to overhaul the whole thing. and panic ensues. That's where I think a lot of like branding goes wrong, is that's the approach that people have, rather than going like, okay, if I work on this part of my branding this month, and then I check in on this part of my branding, and then I make sure that this part is working, and I make this tweak, and I update this, and you're just like always tweaking and working and iterating and
absolutely
checking in. That's like an easier, much more manageable way than having a panic every 3 years and having to update and realize it's not working, and
it becomes this big insurmountable object at that point, right? And you just can't even kind of face it. It's something I talk to my students about a lot as well, is, like avatar work or your ideal client work. It's not something you just do once and then you set and forget. It's something you're always updating. You're always learning more about your clients. You're always learning more about your customers. And it's an ongoing evolution of ideas. You're always refining what you're thinking about. In a way, it's really like the kind of design process that I teach as well. It's like you dump down your design ideas, and we all think that our first design idea is the most amazing thing because it's this like lightning bolt out of nowhere. But really, the great design ideas come through that refining, that iterative process of refining your idea, refining it more, refining it, and continually developing that across time. And the same is for your business as well. You're always refining, you're always developing, you're always tweaking and improving, and this isn't quite working, how can I do this a little bit differently, is this moving me forward or backwards? It's a continual thing. So branding as a part of your business as well is absolutely something that needs that consistent maintenance, I guess it is really. It's like a continual cyclical iterative process that is also really enjoyable too, right? It means that you're continually touching back in with yourself as well. Is this what I really want to be doing? Is this the right direction for me to go in? And continuing to move in the right direction for you too. So I think that's really great to hear that it all ties in together, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I would love to let people know, where can people come and find out more about Maker and Moxie, find out more about you and your brand strategy business?
Yeah, you can find me at makerandmoxie.com and on all the social media platforms at Maker and Moxie. Mostly on Instagram and Threads currently.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, Hollie, thank you so much for sharing your insights here. It's been absolutely fascinating chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I've had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining me and Hollie for this special episode. If you would like to find out more about Hollie and her brand strategy, you can head to www.makerandmoxie.com to find out more about Hollie and her amazing business. Go and check it out. She's got some great branding elements on her website as well, so you can check out what it looks like when you have a brand that's really aligned with your passions and your why and what you do in the world. Thanks again for joining me. Remember to stay curious and keep creating, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.